ceremony, and one of the questions I had when going in was about Sekhmet. And she is an Egyptian goddess. She was also called Vereteka, or Great of Magic.
Yes.
And in the experience, it was very beautiful. I spent a lot of hours in being God, and I felt that everything is in God. And since there are no boundaries between the one and the other, there's really no experience of space or time.
Well, there's no experience at all of the one. The experience happens when it is all that is, the portion of the one that actually does know itself as all that is. But in the one itself, there's no experience of anything.
Yes, and then so you've explained that when God expresses himself, like when the one becomes multiple, it's immediately from 1 to 3. Because when God becomes manifest, there's also the transition period or the boundary line between the two.
Yes.
So my impression was that Sekhmet is actually in this space, that she is able to balance these multiple dimensions, reaching into both of them at the same time. And that brings me to my first question. How would you describe Sekhmet? What does she represent, and in what dimension does she exist?
Sekhmet is an archetypal energy, a level of consciousness within all that is representative of certain concepts on your planet, certain concepts within the collective consciousness of your planet, but expressed through a particular culture called Egyptian awareness. Sekhmet is the idea, to some degree, of what you typically refer to as magic, or what Sekhmet would particularly perceive as shape-shifting from one reality to another, as many of the Egyptian archetypal symbolic gods were representative of. And thus Sekhmet allows for a fluidity of change, a magical kind of representation that can also extend into different disciplines, depending upon how the energy of Sekhmet, if one is used to that idea, if one is familiar with that idea, if one wishes to harmonize with that idea, can apply in their lives in different disciplines. Is this answering your question, or is there something more specific you wanted to discuss about this?
Well, I do have more questions, but that's a very nice start. It's a very good explanation. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so I've heard you talk about cats, and sometimes you use the phrase, the animals that you refer to as cats on your planet. And it made me wonder whether cats or felines or lions exist in on other planets as well.
Well, certainly in parallel realities that are versions of Earth, they do. But of course, on other planets, there may be certain animals that are similar, but not necessarily identical, because they will adapt to whatever form is representative of what's required for the consciousness of that world. So there may be some similarities in different worlds that you may say, well, that's very cat-like, but they won't necessarily exactly be cats.
Is there a connection between cats and Sirius?
Peripherally, but not directly.
You've also explained about shamans and that they are practiced at changing their frequency to match the frequency of other realities and dimensions.
Some of them are, yes.
So how I've understood that we change our frequencies actually by changing our belief system. So by getting rid of fear-based or irrelevant beliefs, we change our frequency. So how would it work if we want to match our frequency to a specific dimension or location? How do we go about?
Well, this is what your imagination is for. If you can build some kind of a image or feeling about what the idea of another reality represents, and see a version of yourself in that, or something that is representative of what you desire to change into, then all you really have to do is start mirroring what that version of you is doing enough, strongly enough, consistently enough, that you start taking on the qualities of that version of you. And then either quickly or slowly over time, you can start actually exhibiting the qualities of that being and therefore shift yourself to that reality.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then, so another thing you've told us about is the Sphinx, that it actually used to have the form of Anubis.
A long time ago, yes.
A long time ago. and that below the Sphinx there's a chamber, and that some of the secrets that have been lost in Atlantis are stored there.
Yes.
So if we would want to access that space or the information that is there, what would that require? How would we
Well, first of all, there are many people in that area who know exactly where that chamber is. They're just not really talking about it. People have asked permission to drill down, to drill a hole under the right paw of the Sphinx, to send a camera through that hole to see what's there, but they have not been allowed to do so at this particular point. So we will leave it up to all of you to figure out how to create a relationship with the people in that area that would be willing to allow that chamber to be explored.
Would there be a possibility of accessing that space by changing our frequency?
Well, of course, you have to change your frequency to experience a difference in reality.
But then, does it require us going there physically?
You don't have to go there physically to be able to know what's there. You can tap into it in a variety of ways. But the idea is that it is important for the revelation of that and exposure of that chamber at a certain timing as well.
Thank you so much, Bashar.
You are welcome. Good day.
Hi, Bashar. I'm Erin from Shepherdstown, West Virginia. I have a question about Willahilla christening the hybrid 700 years in our future. I've encountered a few people who feel some fear about her talking about us being cookies and being eaten eventually when we're fully baked. I was wondering if you could provide some clarity on that statement and maybe help people let go of some fears about that.
As we have discussed, there is an evolution progressing on your planet so that it becomes the 6th hybrid race. In that sense, you are being baked as a species. You are turning into something delicious, not in the literal sense of being eaten, but in the sense of being enjoyed as a beautiful confection, as something you're all familiar with that feels warm and inviting, transforming into something that is considered a lovely dessert. Again, not to be taken literally. So the idea is a euphemism and a euphemistic way of expressing that you're all baking into something beautiful and wonderful.
Hello, Bashar.
Good day, good day.
How are you?
Perfect, and you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
All right.
All right, so my question is, when it comes to things such as parallel timelines,
Yes.
parallel Earths and such, and so there's this version of me experiencing this reality, and there's other versions of me experiencing other realities.
Yes, although they're not literally you.
Oh, could you explain that further?
Well, every version is its own person. They may look
Right,
like
right.
you, and that's why you're saying versions of me, but they're not literally you. They're not this version. They are another person.
Okay, so when are the alternate timelines is there always a split, or is there like when I make a decision there's a split and a split?
The splits don't happen when you make the decisions. The splits are already there. It's just that you shift when you make a decision into that split. And you're doing this constantly, billions of times a second. Remember, what you're calling a single timeline is actually made up of billions of different timelines.
Right, I see. So why do I end up as me experiencing this version of me and the other ones that made the other decisions?
Because the higher version, let's just generally call it the oversoul, that contains all the extensions of all the different versions of you, experiences all those different versions. You happen to be this version that the oversoul decided it would choose to experience, along with all the other versions. You happen to be this version.
I see. And is there any way to say, telepathically communicate with other versions of myself.
Yes. And again, you're doing that all the time. You may not recognize it, but you're doing it all the time. A lot of times, some of the experiences and knowledge of other versions in other realities is leaking through and might be giving you different kinds of imagination thoughts and things like that that you think, so to speak, are your own.
I see.
There's constant cross communication going on.
Right. Oh, constant. And how does this transmission is about karma. How does karma factor into that?
Again, only as we've described it. Each and every version gets to decide for itself in its own representation when it is in alignment with whether its true core frequency is, when it is out of alignment, and what actions can be taken to bring itself back into alignment according to the process that this version represents in discovering who and what you really truly are.
Okay, right. That all makes sense. Now, if I may talk about UFOs just for a minute, and the versions that we have here on Earth that were reverse engineered. I'm just wondering if, where are they up to, right? And how long before they become public, if they become public at all?
Some of it may become public within the next couple of decades, maybe 3 decades at the most. But again, bits and pieces of that information do already exist, of course. This is why you're asking the question. But they're not as far along as you might think. They have reverse engineered certain things that do exhibit what you typically refer to as anti-gravity. But they're still experimenting with a lot of it. And not to put too fine a point on it, but a lot of the ships that they've reverse engineered, well, let's just say, without being judgmental, that they're of a more simple design.
Right, I see. And in a previous transmission, a person did ask if the ones being reverse engineered are interdimensional. And I believe you said the people reverse engineering it came into unexpected consequences. I was wondering if you could go into that more deeply. For example, what unexpected?
Really. Not really. Some of the unexpected consequences are that people got shifted into other dimensions and never came back. Other consequences are they may have shifted through other dimensions to other locations on your planet. Some of them may have been molecularly affected by this. Molecules could have been displaced, gone out of alignment. There can be electromagnetic effects that can be detrimental if it's not done correctly. These are some of the things they have experienced, but we won't go more deeply into it than that.
Okay, that's sort of what I expected the answer to be. Also, next year is 2023.
Yes.
Which I'm looking very forward to, because as you've said many times, that will be the beginning of the window of open contact. Yes. So what I'm thinking is, or what I'm wondering is, when they first make contact, there'll be, I guess, news articles?
Not right away. Not right away. Again, as we have said, just because it's the beginning of the window doesn't mean everything happens all at once. We're just talking about a shift in energy, a shift in vibration in a certain way that allows for the probability of more contact, which will begin in more isolated places on an individual basis, and even just with the idea perhaps of more sightings, more visibly to more people.
Right. So it will slowly start to become commonplace that UFO sightings just an ordinary thing.
Yes, eventually be just like, oh, look, there goes another one.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic news to me, because over the years, for example, in the 1980s, it was often considered crackpots and so on that saw UFOs. So I'm glad that it's becoming more and more common.
All right. Well, that's based on the decisions of those who are shifting to realities where it's already more common.
Oh, that's excellent. I would like to talk about, what we call artificial intelligence, even though it's probably more accurately digital intelligence.
The devices may, in a sense, be artificial, but the intelligence is real.
Right. I see. could you give us a timeline of when the next big leap in artificial intelligence is or will be, and when it will very definitely pass the Turing test?
10 to 15 years maximum.
Oh, 10 to 15 years maximum.
Yes. Somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there. What
Yes.
would be like the nearest? So 10 years that the nearest.
It's not impossible that this could be experienced in 5 years. It's just that we see the probability being higher between 10 and 15.
Right, I understand.
As we read your energy now.
Oh, as we read the energy now. So that could increase depending on decisions in society.
Absolutely. These things are always in flux. And as we have said, there's no such thing as a prediction of the future. There is only a sensing of the energy and the most likely probability of manifestation at the moment the reading is taken.
Right, I understand. Okay. Okay, that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. Good day.
Good day.
Unleash this virus.
Yes, and others as well throughout your history.
So in terms of us rebuilding those ecosystems, can you make some suggestions as far as what the individual can do on their own, as well as other steps that we could take to restore these ecosystems?
Well, again, it's about taking the actions that are germane for the reality that you prefer to live in. So this is really, in some sense, quite obvious. If you have destroyed the ecosystem, restore the ecosystem. Plant trees, clean your water, clean your air, create actions that are in alignment with the idea of the kind of world that you prefer to see. So if you want to see a more forested world, if you want to see a world with cleaner water, or you want to see or breathe in a world with cleaner air, do the things that are available to you with your technology or your abilities to actually create those things, create new environments, recreate them. It's as simple as that. Now, there are other things that you can possibly do, but remember that physical action is the language of physical reality. Therefore, the more you can actually physically do to recreate those ecosystems, bring them back, restore the world to a more natural state in all the ways that you can, find sources of energy that don't pollute, create them, spread them out over your planet in one way, shape, or form. All these things can help you begin to reach out, begin to make more connections with others, share ideas, open up your imaginations for how you can create new societies, new systems that have less impact negatively upon your planet. In some senses, many of you are beginning to do this, but the idea is keep doing it and do it in greater and greater ways with more and more people who are excited about restoring your world to a state of balance. These things are relatively obvious. Just do more of them.
I don't know how that's transmitting right now, but suddenly around me, there's all these horns honking and everything.
Trying to get your attention.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so when we were talking about restoring ecosystems, you know, they're actually quite complex because there's so many varieties and species within an ecosystem.
You have the ability to do it. Do your research and take the actions that are necessary. Just do the best you can. Remember, it's the actions that make the difference. Even if a particular ecosystem is not actually restored on the version of Earth you're on right now, taking the action in that direction is one of the things that will help shift you to the versions of Earth that will actually have more balanced ecosystems. Remember, you never change the world you're on.
Right, and who knows what that path will lead to if people are trying to rebuild an ecosystem. So many things can happen in that process, as interactions between people, interactions with animals, many things that we can't even imagine at this point.
But just follow the formula and take the actions, and you'll shift yourself to versions of Earth that are more and more representative of the idea of balance. And don't forget, it's not that you live in nature. You are nature. So balance yourselves as well.
So another question that's come up around this is the idea that it's a virus, not a bacteria that we're dealing with, and the idea that viruses have consciousness.
Everything is made of consciousness. It just depends on how that consciousness is expressed. It may not be expressed in the same way that a human or a dolphin or any other animal expresses consciousness, but nevertheless, there is an expression of it. It's just that it's going to be a very foreign or alien version of the expression of consciousness that you may not necessarily be able to relate to exactly.
It's interesting because a lot of people have expressed the idea of they want to communicate with the virus. They want to get to know it. They want to create homeopathic ideas of how to work with it. Is this sensible in the sense of...
It can be if it is not done out of fear. Again, remember, everything is about resonance. It's about frequency. It's about vibration, including communication with different forms of life or even inanimate things. So the idea is to find the frequencies that will allow you the best opportunity to commune with it in a way that isn't detrimental to yourself. Again, you'll be creating what you might call a safety zone by creating a simulacrum, a third reality in which the communications take place so that your reality directly is not affected by your decision to alter your vibration in your respective reality. Altering the vibration in the third reality to allow for the communication to occur is like having a communication in a safety zone.
So I know, like, from a shamanic perspective, the idea of communicating with DNA and with plant medicine and just, communicating with plants, does that open you up to bringing that energy into your body, or that's what you're talking about by creating a simulacrum?
Yes.
You have a buffer so that you can communicate with an energy such as a virus, but not at the same time invite it into your physical being.
Correct. It's like communicating through an airlock. Now, here's something else to understand about the idea of creating what you might perceive as an elimination of that particular expression of a virus in your reality altogether. And this goes for any kind of disease as well. Many people are beginning on your planet to explore the idea of using resonant frequencies in order to allow them to mitigate the idea of disease-carrying organisms or disease-causing organisms. But the basic secret of that, the basic clue for using frequencies in that way is, A, find the frequency of the organism itself, and then simultaneously, as you are embedding the organism in its own frequency, if you embed it in a harmonic of another frequency 11 times greater, then that organism will actually cease to thrive in your reality.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
As I drop any and all of my fear-based thought process and beliefs, what will my experience be with regard to my family members and my close friends and my children who may or may not be able to do these things? Particularly, I think there's a concern about people's children, like they can't understand this. How will the children come with them in this?
All right, well, maybe they will and maybe they won't. First of all, you have to understand that if you accelerate yourself, you will probably then be capable of having the inspiration and imagination to know how to communicate to your children in ways that will allow them to understand these concepts as well, and perhaps then make choices to go along, to shift along with you. That's number one. However, number two, you still have to treat children as individuals, as conscious beings that make their own choices and have their own life path. So the idea is that, yes, there may be situations where different individuals, be they family members or relationships or children, may not ultimately be capable of making the same choices and creating or at least projecting versions of themselves in the reality that you are going to. But again, you have to allow them to make their own choices. All you can do is accelerate yourself so that you have the greatest capability of teaching them how they can do so for themselves as well. And this goes for anyone else. You become a living example. You know exactly what to say. You understand these principles clearly enough that you can pass them along, and then give them the best opportunity, as we have said, to practice these principles so they understand how to use them, to understand that they're self-empowered, to understand the consequences of their choices, so they can make mature choices as they grow. And they will decide in that sense then where they truly need to be. But that's as much as you can do. You have to trust the whole process, that even though someone may be born to you as a child, they're still a separate individual that has their own path. And sometimes their path may not always include being in touch with you. Now, maybe they'll go out, maybe they'll come back in. It just depends. But you have to treat everyone as an infinite, indestructible being. And if somebody doesn't understand something now in this life, they'll understand it somewhere. Nothing is lost. Nothing is wasted. No one will ever be permanently lost to you, because on some other level, you will reconnect. And perhaps on that level, you will understand more clearly why they took the path they did, and it will make sense to you at that time. But you will always be bound by unconditional love if you are unconditional in your loving.
So the idea that what will come up for many individuals under the scenario you just described is their fear of loss, their attachment to other people and things like that, and possibly even holding themselves back or making a choice to not move forward because of the anticipation that it could create some kind of loss.
Yes, and this is where you anchor yourself to a reality that you're saying you don't prefer, because you have a definition that there is such a thing as loss. Change your definition. Understand the greater selves that you are. See yourselves from a greater perspective, a higher perspective, where you know you are always in touch on some level. And that's what we're saying is when you accelerate your own vibration, one of the symptoms of going into a higher version of physical reality is you'll have the capability in your senses to be able to sense more of that being, more of that personality on another level. And you will know that you're always in touch. You will know that you're never really out of touch, even if temporarily the personality projection of that person may seem to be missing from your life, but they're not really missing if you are capable of communicating with them on a higher level. So it serves you to know you're always in touch by accelerating yourself forward and not anchoring yourself to a reality that has a definition of loss and disconnection in it. Then all you're doing is reinforcing the idea that they're missing, when in fact there are many aspects of their being that may be attempting to communicate with you, but then you're the one that's missing because you're not allowing yourself to go into a state where you could perceive that more of that person, not necessarily the personality, but more of that being may be attempting to talk to you. And you're not paying attention because you're not in the right frame of mind and the right state of being to know that you never actually lose anything. You just shift to a different level of understanding and communication.
So fundamentally, it always comes back to dealing with your own state of being and whether or not you're staying in a positive state or you're succumbing, in a sense, to negative beliefs.
Not succumbing. Watch the definition. Choosing. Yes. Stay in the driver's seat. Stay empowered. Use empowering definitions. Not succumbing. Choosing. Because when you know you're choosing, you have something to work with that you can change. If you say succumbing, then there's nothing you can do. You are powerless. Or at least you're using your power to pretend that you're powerless. And if you don't prefer to do that, watch your definitions, because they determine how you experience everything in your reality.
This question kind of ties into this also, because someone asked if you can talk about the transition from helpless infant to fully creating adult, and whether infants are actually helpless, and is this a gradual transition, and anything, that we can do to support our children in
We're just going to give you a very brief answer on that. The idea, again, is that, yes, of course, in terms of physical reality, obviously children that are very, very young need the support and guidance of the adults. But the idea, again, is in allowing them to become powerful, mature adults, you must allow them at whatever age seems reasonable to you to first and foremost not pick up from you telepathically the idea of fear-based beliefs. So be clear within yourself as best as you can so you don't pass those ideas of fear along to them. Then again, as you are able to teach them using your own imagination, the idea of in a safe place that your imagination has created for them physically, teaching them through actual actions the consequences of their choices, teaching them that they are as powerful as they need to be to attract whatever they need in life without harming themselves or anyone else, and adapting any lessons in physical reality you believe are important for them to learn, adapting them to their excitement instead of dampening their excitement to fit into the lesson. These three things can empower a child to become a mature adult very rapidly because they're already an eternal being. They're already a high intelligence. And in many cases, remember that young children haven't forgotten as much of who they are. And therefore, they can actually be great teachers for the so-called adults that may themselves simply be children in the process of maturing.
They represent the idea of service, represent the idea of connections to spirit as the energy of service, as the energy of unconditional love, and are willing to take on, for the people they associate with, many of the symbolic reflections of issues and challenges that the human may be going through to reflect back to you as a mirror of service what it is you're going through by seeing the behavior in the dog, and understand again it is connected to Sirius, and that's why you intuitively call it the dog star. So the idea of higher perception, higher vibration, higher frequencies of unconditional love and service to all is what the dog represents as an animal on your planet in general, among other things that we will not go into that deeply at this time.
Ha'atu Bashar.
And to you, good day. Ha'atu.
It's my honor and pleasure to speak with you today.
As it is for us as well. What would you like to discuss?
My first question is, how does one differentiate between communication from the higher mind or spirit guide as opposed to something conjured up in the physical mind?
Well, it's not always important to do so if the information is something that works to your benefit in the direction you prefer. Therefore, trying to figure out where it's coming from or who it's coming from isn't always as important as you might think, because it could get in your way and slow down the process of simply acting on the information if it is representative of the vibration you prefer. So you don't always have to differentiate. If it is important that you should differentiate, synchronicity will probably bring to your attention a way in which to do so.
Thank you.
Yes.
How can one recognize that one is a different person even if they have memories of trauma of past events from non-preferable versions of themselves and experiences?
Well, you can begin to recognize perhaps a difference in the so-called emotional distancing that may occur if you're simply looking at something from another version of yourself, maintaining your ability to see that version, but not necessarily having the strength of feeling that you used to have about it. That's one way. It can be something more observational, like you're looking at a movie of someone else as opposed to something that's truly still as relevant to you as it used to be. That's one way.
Thank you.
The fact also, one moment, we're not done.
Sorry.
The fact also that you may be looking at that event itself from another perspective as a way of recognizing yourself and even asking the question itself, how can I tell the difference, is an indication that you may be using that connection differently than you used to.
I see. Are you also doing first contact work in any other very different time periods on Earth? And if so, may you share?
In a way, my civilization is. I myself am focused in what you would recognize as your present timeline in general, though there are parallel reality aspects to that as well. In different timelines and different versions of Earth, that I am also simultaneously in contact with. But my civilization has to some degree interacted with your civilization in what you call ancient times? Yes.
What meaning does the year 2023 have from your perspective?
It has different meanings from different perspectives depending upon who we are speaking with. Because we're only referring to this idea of your present year from the perspective of the people with whom we connect.
Are you limited by the information that is only experienced through Darryl? As an example, a piece of art that Darryl has never seen may mean that you haven't seen it. So I'm curious if it is the same with certain knowledge and information as well.
To some degree, yes. First of all, we impose certain limitations on ourselves in communicating with your species if that information would interfere with your process and your growth. So there are things we may not know while we're communicating with you that we will know when we reconnect with our own civilization. But yes, there are certain limitations. If the channel doesn't have certain vocabulary, then we may not be able to express a certain idea in a way that may make sense to humans, in the way they are used to hearing it. We can make an attempt to express it in other terms that are within the channel's vocabulary. So there is that limitation that does exist. There are certain things we can allow our consciousness to impress upon the channel's consciousness that go beyond his immediate knowledge. The word Bashar itself is an example of that. But that's easier done when the channel has absolutely no idea what to expect, no idea of what is coming in that context. Because he didn't speak the language that the word Bashar comes from. And therefore we're able to sort of slip it in because he had no idea what to expect of our connection to him at that time, at that point. So we're able to do it because he didn't know that he couldn't receive it.
Ah, interesting. When was the Sphinx built, and why is it a lion?
It wasn't a lion to begin with. It was Anubis to begin with. The idea of the so-called god of the dead, the underworld. It is about 10,500 of your years ago, far longer than your present archaeologists believe. It was done at the time, slightly before and during the destruction of Atlantis, for the preservation of knowledge and instruction for the reclaiming of that knowledge at your present time in general. And it has to do with the connections to the stars and the connection to spirit guides having to do with the idea of the underworld. Over time, the Sphinx has become eroded and changed and resculpted in a variety of ways. But its original form was as Anubis, which represents the idea of your connection to the spirit realm.
I see. Seeing as how the Earth is a planet with a theme of recycling, I was curious as to how many times the Earth has been repopulated with humans.
Humans, as you understand them today, have not repopulated the Earth. Other kinds of beings have populated the Earth before your time.
Were they very different from human beings or somewhat?
Some of them were humanoid. A few of them were not at all.
Why are they not here right now?
Because it is your time. They have done what they needed to do, just as you will eventually no longer reincarnate as human on the Earth when it is no longer your time, when you no longer need the lessons that Earth can provide. In about 1,000 of your years, you will stop reincarnating altogether as the human species because you will already have been evolved into the 6th hybrid race, and you will move on to something else. And other beings will come in to take advantage of the cycles of Earth in their own way, on their own journey.
Wow.
It's like graduating from a school. Why go back? You have graduated. other students will come in to use the facilities, to learn new things.
I hear that. One last question, if I may. If possible, may I receive a mantra from your ancient language, perhaps maybe to help me connect more clearly with the silver cord?
Ash-ah shakanani. Ash-ah shakanani. Ash-ah shakanani.
Thank you so much. Namaste, aho, and my deepest unconditional love your way for all that you do. And I mean, thank you so much.
Aveo.
Aveo.
Hey, hello, Bashar. So my question is about a couple years ago, I was meditating. And when I about to end my meditation, I heard a voice. And this voice is both female and male. And they said, "We are surround you," in English. By the way, my first language is Chinese, and they spoke to me in English. This is the first time. And second time is, so I was meditating. And when I'm about to end my meditation, I heard a voice. This time it's definitely a male voice. And he said, "Come with me." And I asked back, "Who are you?" And I get no answer. And meanwhile, at the same time, I can feel this electricity can go from the top of my head and through my spine across my body. So my question is, what happened and who was it? What's their purpose? Thank you, Bashar. I love you.
Our unconditional love to you as well. This is a combination of different things happening by your spirit guides and by your own higher mind and by your connections to many other things that you are connected to energetically and interdimensionally. It's basically for the purpose of allowing you to experience the result and rewards of your meditation in raising your frequency. That vibration you felt was the result of raising your frequency as the physical body interprets it. So the idea is, come with me means be yourself, be your higher self, be like me. So you are being assisted by guides and your higher self through your meditations. So continue if you wish. It will help you.
Hello and good day.
Good day, good day.
How are you?
Perfect, and you?
Also perfect. Thank you for that reminder.
All right. What would you like to discuss?
In the past, we've discussed genetics and the technology of such, and I wanted to further clarify and have a conversation.
Repeat the word.
I wanted to have a conversation around genetics and the understanding of how your contact sigil, which is a geometry I've been fascinated with, or even before I met you, in regards to how that and the Triana relate to genetics, as well as the teachings of Jesus Christ relate to genetics as well in the Bible.
All right, I'm going to give you one phrase that covers it all and let you ponder this.
Yes.
As above, so below. The idea of DNA is what you are as a physical being. Ponder those things. As above, so below. Look at the order in which that occurs. And the idea of DNA is what you are as a physical being.
So what comes to mind when you say that is as above, or in the quantum field, or in the all that is, in the Father energy, in the expression of God. Below, that is lens through the individual relationship of our genetics, which creates our physical experience.
To some degree, yes.
So
which starts as DNA.
Yes.
And is you as a physical being. This body that you all walk around in is the suit that DNA required to have a physical experience. But you, as a physical being, are actually the DNA.
Yes. So would it be accurate to say that DNA is the lensing mechanism for all that is, or for the quantum plenum or the ether to express itself physically?
Yes.
And so in your contact sigil, what comes to mind is that trinary structure, similar to the triana. You have the trinary structure, which could relate to the codons in the DNA. So you have 64 codons. And then you have that Fibonacci spiral that can be clockwise or counterclockwise. You have a binary code of that trinary structure.
Yes, although it's not just a binary code, because you have to think multidimensionally.
Yes.
Not just in a plane.
Yeah, of course. It's, yeah,
All right.
Okay. And then, so in the teachings of Jesus Christ, when he says, you know, even the least among you can do as I do, I and my Father are one. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word is God. It seems as though that is saying what I hear you saying in regards to that God, all that is, goes through the Word, which is our DNA or our translation interface to...
Well, it's a vibration. It's a vibrational frequency. It's resonance. The word is resonance, frequency, vibration. That then transmutes into the idea of the DNA and projects into a physical reality experience. Remember, the symbolic interpretation that is imposed upon many ideas of your religion is that it is a trinity.
Yes.
Whether or not the symbols that are used are necessarily literal isn't the point. The point is that it is recognized as a trinity. As above, so below, but there's an in-between, always.
Yes, and that in-between would have a positive, negative, neutral lensing.
In terms of the sigil, you have the three that represent the idea of the trinity, but then you have the spiral that is the active principle in the center that brings into being what is above into below.
Got it. So it's a transceiver. So that's the geometry of how it receives and how it expresses.
Yes.
Optimally.
Yes.
In the past, we've discussed a genetic or resonance technology for health that's related to that Fibonacci spiral, more specifically to the 0.6180 frequency that corresponds to the same DNA width to length. And obviously that golden ratio is everywhere.
Yes. 1 to 1.618, yes.
So that 1 to 1.618
represents how the structure of physical reality expands fractally.
Yeah, fractal propagation is all on that.
Yes.
Which seems as though that's also how your internal lattice structure physiologically, what's known as the interstitial fluid matrix, those ratios of linkages are all that same ratio.
Yes, and it is also representative of the interstitial structure between dimensions.
Oh, wow. And how does that relate to pi? Because in the past, you've discussed pi being that in-between parallel realities.
Pi is the expansive principle within each dimension, the infinite expanding principle that never ends. So every dimension that exists contains at its core a seed that is pi, representing its expansive potential.
Okay. And then so all in the book of Genesis, when it talks about all of the plants, all of the animals, the human dominion over those aspects being a seed in kind that is God, it's also discussing the relationship of genetics that permeates all.
Yes, and remember that in its ancient meaning, dominion doesn't mean in control of, it means caretaker of.
Yeah. Hopefully we bring that back. Thank you so much, Bashar.
Thank you. Aveo. Get what I expected. I didn't get what I was insisting on. I didn't get what I assumed would happen. They may translate that as their life is falling apart. But be careful how you frame these things, because the way you frame them can tell you everything about why you're experiencing it, because you think it should have gone another way. The idea is to allow yourself to recognize that whatever it is that is happening for a reason. And the reason is there's a belief there you need to look at that's creating that experience. So if you're going through something that feels like your life is falling apart, it's probably because you had a definition that is so rigidized that doesn't necessarily manifest in the way you insisted it must, that's going to appear to you as if your life is falling apart, when in fact it may actually be falling open, so that you can see there may be other paths that are better for you than the one you were insisting on. So watch the definitions even when you frame a question that way. That could be in and of itself what's causing the situation to feel negative, just by framing it as if it's true that the life is falling apart. There is another way to look at it. Find it.
All right. And along those lines, the idea of feeling lost. That if a person feels that feeling of I feel lost, what is the appropriate or better way to interpret that state as opposed to I can't what's the best way to deal with that state?
Why do you think that's any different than what we just talked about?
Okay, so you're saying that you're interpreting what's happening in a negative way.
Yes.
So what that creates the feeling of being lost. And instead, if you feel that lost feeling, better to refocus on the idea of adapting and reinventing oneself.
Don't overcomplicate it. Remember the initial question. Anytime, first and foremost, remember, you cannot have a feeling without a belief first. You can't. It's not possible. So any feeling that you believe is negative, any feeling that's uncomfortable, the question is, what would I have to believe is true about myself in order to feel it the way I'm feeling it? You cannot have a feeling in a vacuum. Keep it simple. Remember the principles we have shared, how it works, and ask the appropriate question and be willing to explore and hear the answer. It's that simple. Don't overcomplicate it.
Okay, and this is the same question, but this individual is saying how thing after thing happens and they attempt to stay neutral, but basically it still comes down to, regardless how it looks, you cannot allow yourself the luxury of interpreting it in a negative way.
You can allow yourself that luxury if you wish to wallow in the negativity. That's fine. It's your choice. I'm not telling you you can't do it. I'm telling you you don't have to choose that. And I've also instructed you as to the way to not choose it. So yes, it's exactly the same thing that we just talked about.
Okay. So I think that answers the question of what this person was saying, which is, what am I doing wrong?
Nothing. You're not doing anything wrong, but you are giving in to belief systems that you don't prefer. That's your choice. If you're tired of doing that, use the techniques that we're talking about and make a different choice. One choice over another is not more important, doesn't carry more weight. The universe, all that isn't going to judge you for whatever you choose, and isn't going to take sides and say, this is good and this is bad. You are either in alignment with all that is, or you're out of alignment with all that is, but you're still within all that is, no matter what you choose. So you always have the opportunity to come back into alignment with the frequency of unconditional love for yourself by making the choices that are more representative of that. And that doesn't just mean being nice to yourself. It means making the choices to choose definitions that work for you as opposed to the ones that don't. To be true to yourself. That's what we're saying here. We're not talking about just skipping down the boulevard singing happy songs. We're talking about when challenges come up, taking a moment, taking a pause, and actually realizing that you have a choice to make about how you will relate to the circumstance that's manifesting every single moment. Choose what you prefer. Choose the definitions that work. Stop choosing the definitions that don't. You are completely free to do that. Use your freedom. Use your free will.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So we have some ET questions here now.
All right.
Let's see. The souls of people on Earth never leave their real home, as we are like dreaming and playing an online game.
Yes, you're all in spirit.
So I would like to know if there's also a situation for Essassani beings as well. Are you also having dreams and your souls are in your real home, and then Bashar as an extraterrestrial being may also be an avatar or some experience that is in Bashar's dream?
Yes. Everyone is in spirit. Everyone, everywhere. That's the natural state of all consciousness, non-physical, as you would understand that term. So every physical reality of any kind, any projection of any kind, in a sense, is the spirit having a dream to have a certain experience. Yes, we're all the same in that context.
Okay. And are you in contact with beings who identify themselves as Ra, or the raw material, a series of channeled books that claim to be an extraterrestrial social memory complex?
Yes, we understand. We know what that is.
So you're aware of their
Yes.
or whatever?
Yes.
Is extraterrestrial in nature?
Well, more extra-dimensional, but it can have an extraterrestrial expression.
Okay. And one person is saying that they have certain spiritual visions and dreams and all these things that are very exciting to experience.
Yes.
But then they find that they're quite different than what the physical reality is that they're living. And they just wanted to understand how to not feel that disappointment, in a sense, that the grand visions and the exciting things they're experiencing on.
All right, well, again, we have to some degree discussed the idea of dropping your insistences and assumptions about how you think things are supposed to happen, and allow yourself to relate to things in a more positive way through the definitional relationships that you create with whatever it is that's happening in the way that it's happening. It's happening that way for a reason, and the reason may simply be that this is the way it really needs to happen to serve you best. Or the reason may be that it brings your attention to something about the definitions you're using to create a less than pleasant experience for yourself, a disappointing experience for yourself. You are disappointing yourself from the present by buying into definitions that don't work for you. So reappoint yourself into the present by choosing definitions for what's happening that work for you, instead of assuming that the way it's happening can only have a negative definition that doesn't work. There is always another way to look at something that can actually serve you better.
Okay, and this question is, how do UFOs keep their occupants safe from the extreme G-forces in Earth's gravity field when the ships make dynamic maneuvers?
Because there is a field around the ship that allows the ship to move space-time with it. Therefore, there's no motion relative to space-time within the ship, because space-time is moving in a bubble around the ship. The ship is moving in a space-time bubble. So it's as if, relative to space-time, it's not moving. So there are no G-forces.
I don't know if this is the same thing, but in the movie Contact, when Jodie Foster was being dropped through a certain energy field.
Not the same thing.
No.
That was the utilization of a concept you call